and coding in Google is very difficult. I'll tell you. What happens is they share a Google Doc, which is pretty bad, and like people are not focused on their careers. So yeah, after 10th, though, it was very tough.
Guys,
Over the
welcome back
last
to Entrance and Beyond. We are shooting this episode related to Google and Amazon. So the guest I have today comes from a Tier 3 normal college that most of the audience comes from, and she really excelled well technically, and she completed her internship at Amazon, and now it's going to be a SWE intern at Google in the coming summer. And it's a great achievement given the fact that she has covered two companies of the Mang, and Mang is the dream of most people who want to actually join the technical world as a engineer or as a SWE engineer. So yeah, Shruti Jan, thank you so much for coming. Could you please introduce yourself to the audience? Hopefully, I didn't miss anything.
Yeah. Hi, hello everyone. I'm a third year student, actually, engineering student, and my branch of study is AI/ML. But as you all know, that computer science is the major branch, and now every college is now sort of introducing these branches: AI/ML, AIDS. So AI/ML, although is my specification, but my core is of computer science. And yeah, I have been very lucky that I got interviewed in these companies and got the opportunity to work with them. I'm pretty excited to share my knowledge and my process with everyone because I never had anyone for guidance. So yeah, I hope I'll be helpful.
Yeah. So before we jump into Google and all that, I'd want to know your life after grade 10, 11. Like, did you go with the conventional PCM path? And how were things before you actually landed in your college?
Yeah, so like pretty normal girl in a like good. My school was good actually. I'm from originally from Madhya Pradesh, so I had my 10th. After that, in 11th, 12th, I had PCM. Although during my times there was COVID, so we never
Yeah.
had our 12th exams, and I was not very sure about what to do. I never had any engineer in my family, no guidance regarding that. So I just thought ki I'll prepare for competitive exams after my 12th. I don't want to mix up everything. So I focused on boards, but boards never happened for us. Then I had to take a drop year to understand what all the fields are there. So actually, I'm a dropper batch student. So I had 1 year drop, and during those times, I appeared for JEE, but due to the malfunctions of the NTA, my paper was all erased and it was not correct. So I used to get very low marks in JEE, and I had no way to prove my like technical expertise over there. So I was forced to take like admission in a tier 3 college, and I gave up all of my hopes. When I came here, I saw that the culture is pretty bad, and like people are not focused on their careers. So yeah, after 10th, though, it was very tough. Over the last, I say, 10 months, my life has been good technically and academically. But before that, there were a lot of struggles for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the coding culture and all of that because you mentioned the culture in your college wasn't that good, and there's a lot of people with that typical like boards or 10 sort of mindset where they're just going for the exams, the university exams, and things like that. And we all know how people prepare for that, and you don't really actually get a feel of things due to the fact that the papers are pretty much predictable as well. There's not anything new where you can actually sort of delve into your expertise, and furthermore, the syllabus is outdated at times. We can't really complain about that,
Hmm.
but that is the reality, so as to say, in most colleges. So yeah, would you want to talk about that? Like, how did you go through your first year, and like how did you sort of get out of that mindset? I want to like talk about that. How did like get out of that sort of mindset where you weren't really in the best of colleges, but you still want to do something well?
Yeah, so I was very ambitious from the start. I wanted, even though I understood that I am now in a private college and a tier 3, not. So I had to work my way up. So when I went to the college for the first year, I never had any coding prior experience. Hats off to my teachers. One of the teacher taught really well, and it helped me gain my like favoritism towards the coding. Then once I got introduced to the world of coding, I focused on building the concepts. Of course, there was no coding culture in my college, but coding helped me build the concepts, and it was very interesting to me. for to start with. So once I got my fundamentals clear, I jumped into like hacker rank questions. I tried to solve certain questions, and there used to be contest conducted by our seniors sometimes. So I like went for it. I participated, and through that I got to know, okay, this is where I lack. This is where I want to work on. At the same time, our most senior batch was getting placed, and the statistics were horrible. People were not getting placed because it was right after COVID.
Yeah.
No, so I had this fear in my mind that after 4 years, if don't get placed, I have nowhere to go. So I started understanding how the off-campus scenario works. I got to know that how the job openings comes and how people and students work for it and get their placements. So I started like that. Although I got my internship at Amazon through a scholarship that I received in the first year. My scholarship is for all 4 years of engineering. So under that scholarship, I have a perk that those scholars can apply for the internship at Amazon after second year. So I applied, I appeared for the exam, and based on your exam and your score, you get the role. Like there were seven different roles: SDE, there was support engineer, there was data engineer, there was business intelligence engineer, tester. So this way. So my score was pretty good. I got SD internship, and this is how I navigated my journey in college. And to answer your question on how to break free of that mindset where your coding culture is not there in your college and your peers are not really working towards it. So the thing is, you have to realize yourself, like, see, the people whom you are seeing, these will be your competitors in the coming years. You cannot expect them, because what happens in colleges is during the fourth year, you get to know, oh, this person was working. Actually, they were doing something. It was only not seen towards you. It was not projected in their way that, oh, they were working. And things have a mysterious way to work out. You just have to start. You have to work on yourself. You have to take some steps. You have to go the extra mile outside of your college curriculum and apply for things and learn. Be aware of how the market situation is working.
Yeah. So, did you ever express like sort of dissatisfaction, or did you ever blame your college? Because a lot of people do that. They enter college the first year, they don't do a lot, and especially for our batch where it started very late due to COVID and all that, you don't really get too much time to adjust all that. And by the time they're in their third year, when they're applying for internships, or when even for some people when they're sort of into their fourth year, they have a great focus on blaming the college that we're not getting opportunities and things like that. So did you ever feel like that? And what's your message to anyone that actually, rather than putting in the work, they're more focused on the fact that their college isn't good or they're not getting the opportunities they would get in suppose a tier one or better college?
Correct. I agree that as a tier 3 students, we do have a problem. We don't have that head start that others in good colleges have. But you have to understand that you cannot change the whole system now. Now you're in that college. Now you cannot do. You can busy yourself all 4 years blaming the college, but it won't do you any good. After you pass out, they will still get thousands of admissions. They will still earn, and nothing will change. So we have to come out of that victim mindset, and we have to understand ki this is our journey, and the market situation compared to last 2 years has been much better now. So you can prepare. You can easily prepare. Now you have Raj Vikramaditya, you have Apna College. There are teachers teaching so well on YouTube. What are you complaining about? So it is not really the college that you need to blame. You have to understand your own needs and go for it. And the like I did waste a couple of months initially in college because we came out of COVID and we were out of touch of studies. And it's not always easy when everybody is enjoying first year. Okay, this is just the first year. We have 4 years. So yeah, I think that giving yourself some time in the first year to settle in is a good idea. But you must start at some point. Starting in fourth year will be costly. So even if you are a second year student or a third year student listening to this podcast, my message is that start today.
Okay. You mentioned,
Understanding that what your goal is.
yeah. Right. So
Okay.
you mentioned that you got a scholarship at Amazon. So, would you want to talk about that? Basically, what that opportunity is and who can apply for it, and what are the? We've already talked about the perks, but can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that is actually irrelevant now because it can only be applied in the first year and
Okay.
it is only for girls. So those in first year taking admission and girls scholars and studying computer science branches, they can apply for it. And other than Amazon, actually there are major companies giving scholarships, like there is Reliance Foundation. I'm a scholar for Reliance Foundation as well. So for that it's gender neutral, they are giving to all, and the support of these scholarships is amazing. They give a lot of mentorship, they try to give you internship opportunities, they give you certain trainings like soft skills trainings and Excel trainings. So they help you. The scholars who are a part of such programs get much more exposure because they know what other scholars, all of the states, people all around India, what are they doing. So that is the scholarship that I got. I have both Reliance Foundation and Amazon Future Engineer scholarship.
Okay. So you talked about Amazon Future Engineer Scholarship, and people can look that up, and I think they could get the
Yeah, yeah.
details regarding the scholarships that are available. So yeah, before we actually jump into the other stuff, did you do DSA or Dev? There's a huge debate that goes on. Should you do DSA or Dev? And I saw this post on LinkedIn where there's some people that are busy in the DSA Dev sort of debate, and there's other people that are doing both, and they're actually getting somewhere rather than being stuck on that debate. So, if you want to say anything about the DSA versus Dev so-called debate?
Yeah, so I don't think it is even a topic of debate. I just don't understand. You understand this, please, that DSA is a vast, vast topic, and development is a very small topic which can be done through ChatGPT as well. You can get all the LLMs to work for you to build the website to get the development. But DSA is something that chat GPTs, the LLMs are not able to solve. You have to understand why are they not able to solve, because it requires high technical knowledge. My general answer to this question is do DSA. When you get bored or frustrated with DSA, you take a break and at that time you do development, because development is a creative side whereas DSA is very analytic and problem solving side. So you can never weigh DSA and development on the same scale. DSA is much above on priority, and given that you want to take a part in a major company, if you want to work in a major company, you have to understand that all their entrance exams, all the internship tests or the PPO tests
Yeah.
that they have are based on DSA. There's a reason they are only asking DSA. You cannot do anything alone with development. So my simple answer is do DSA first. When you get frustrated, go to development for a couple of months. DSA requires much more consistency, much more time, and much more dedication, whereas development is much more free flowing. You can build on it as much as you want. So yeah.
Yeah. And I would also like to say we can't really compare oranges and apples. Like you mentioned, they're sort of different playing fields, and it depends on your goals as well. I think because certain startups or companies they give more focus maybe towards development, but overall, like you mentioned, in order to even get into the company, you need some sort of logic or DSA. And I would say that like DSA maybe might be sort of like maths, where you're trying to build logic, and we can say Dev is sort of like a field like arts or something like that, where you're sort of developing something, and then you need to know a bit about UX, UI design, and then you're sort of just showing your skills as to whatever product you want to develop, and it's something that not everyone likes. Some folks actually,
Correct, correct.
but they also have to have some sort of DSA background just to get in. So yeah, so resources for DSA, mostly people talk about Lead Code and HackerRank and things like that. But I want to talk about the importance of competitions because I think that is something that helps you sort of understand where you exactly stand. Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
why I do focus on competitions is like lead code that you're solving or on hacker rank if you're solving, that is with your laptop in your room that you're doing it. You don't get the exact exposure. There is no check on whether you are copy pasting it or whether you are referring it or what is your mindset during that. But when in competitions you have certain kind of pressure, you have the whole environment working out for different things. You may see a competitor which is much better than you and it might trigger you and it might motivate you. So competitions are a great way of getting exposure because it is a timed manner of achieving something. So yeah, competitions play a very important role, and especially the hackathons that are happening all over the world today. See, that is a great way of silent hiring. Most companies are hiring through hackathon winners. You have to understand why. They cannot invest every time in interviews and everything.
Yeah.
So hackathons are a great way of connecting. They are a great way of like enunciating your name in the environment. Ki, okay, there is this person who has won this award, this competition. So even the interviewers, before you go for the interview, they know your achievements. Like I tell you an example, if you go on LinkedIn and see, there are certain people who, if they particularly participated for a company's hackathon, they have gotten invitations for internship tests. Company is themselves sending them the internship test if they think that they performed well. Top 50 people are getting it. So even though you did not win the competition, you still are getting a significant amount of attention from the recruiters. So it is significant. No, you have to understand to go to those competitions and put yourself out there in those situations. So yeah, it's very important.
And I think to name a few companies, Mastercard does some sort of hiring through their hackathons that they have. I think just pay also does, and there's and more number of companies that have their very own hackathons that they run, and from that they sort of give you an opportunity to go for the rounds and things like that. So I wanted to talk about revision because there's a lot of there are a lot of podcasts or resources where we can understand how exactly you should solve a problem on lead code. What's the approach, and people have different approaches, and it also depends on what you like. But I want to talk about revision because I think that is revision important first of all, and if it is important, particularly in DSA, did you revise something? Because I feel like it's something that's related to mathematics, and even in mathematics you need to revise after some sort of time. So did you do something like that, and should people do something like that?
Yeah, I learned this a very hard way that you have to revise. Even if I am able to solve a binary tree question today, it may be possible that after 2 months, because I have lost my touch to the initial topics, it may happen that the question which I was able to solve 2 months before, I might forget the logic building for that, and it may take me more time. So my revision strategy is simple. I do one question of the day that I always do, and I do revise the already solved questions. Since I have a copy made for all the like approach that I do, I have a lot of pencil work. So I can choose any question. Okay, this question I should do today, this one. If now this revision strategy could be either topic based, like if I'm doing a binary tree question today, so a question that I have already done before can be done, so it needs not to revise the topic again because I've already solved a binary tree question today. Or it can be sequentially, like the first 100 questions in the next 200 days. So you can like you can invent your own strategy, but you have to revise. DSA is a very tricky concept and it's vast, as I said earlier. So yeah, revision is important.
Yeah, you mentioned that book. I think that's something that's really important. A lot of people, because they are solving questions, they have done a lot of questions. Their quantity is good, but they don't really grasp onto the concepts. And I think it's important to have a book where you can jot down the approaches and things like that. So, what did you mention? Like, right in your book, did you have mind maps or yeah? What was
No,
that?
no. I just have a plain book. It's plain copy. So what I do is when I encounter questions, I have a habit of building approach. To me, a question is just like a riddle, a puzzle. Most of these questions are like cubes and matrices. So I have a mindset of drawing those. Ki how will I solve it in my mind? If this was not a coding question, then how would a kid approach it? And once I have the approach, once it is jotted down, like I understand, okay, this is how it is done. Now I turn it into a mathematical model through code. Okay, now I have to code it. Now, what can be the concept? How can I optimize? Now, the time complexity scenario comes as well. So, I have my mind working better when I jot things down. So, that is why I have a notebook, and I really don't understand the concept of how people are solving without a pen and paper. Because how can you have all of that in your mind? It takes an insane amount of experience to do that without pen and paper. So hats off those people who are doing it.
Some of them might be the Chat GPT folks where they just put the question
Ah.
and they get it solved, and they're like, "Yeah, we've done some DSA." So I wanted to talk about Amazon now because in the previous podcast I have done a bit of talking about Google and things related to that. So yeah, it would be fun if you could explain your experience with the entire Amazon selection process, and if you could guide folks with what are the steps that you went through and how exactly things work out there in Amazon.
Yeah, so mine actually was scholarship based. So we had a 3 hour exam online test on metal, and the software is crazy strict. Like if you look down, it gives you a warning, and you have five warnings only. So I got three just because I was thinking, seeing down. So that is how the interface they have.
Yeah.
And then the questions were throughout engineering that we study multiple disciplines like OOPS, DBMS, software engineering. There was hands-on programming, like from scratch we had to do it. So three problems on coding and 47 questions remaining MCQs. Now the MCQs, you need to understand it. It was not like a single line and a one correct answer. They were legit word problems. They want to test you. Like if you come to Amazon, how are you gonna work? And Amazon have the concept of leadership principles which govern the whole organization. They have 12 leadership principles, and there were a lot of questions that were testing your LPs. So this section of behavioral round, which usually companies take out through managers, Amazon has this unique way of sending those questions in the questionnaire itself, in the assessment. So you don't have that much time to think about it. You are not as prepared as you are in the managerial round. So yeah, so they test you in various ways. The questions were, I say, standard. If you understand the concept well, you will be able to solve it. But if your concept and basics are not good, you may have problem in you may face confusion between the options. The hands-on programming questions were a bit tricky, but if you give it fair amount of time and if you have enough practice, you'll be able to crack it. So the process was simple, but this was for scholarship holders. For other folks, the process is that you have the application form, resume shortlisting is done. After that, you are given an assessment. Assessment, if you solve it, it usually has two questions, two coding questions, around 60 minutes. I'm not sure about it. I'll have to check it. Then after that, you get the interview link. In interview, you have to have your camera on, audio on, and the interview poses with you with a question. You have to code it from scratch. You have to explain why you have posed this solution. You have to explain the time complexity, and if the interviewer asks, then you might have to explain an optimized way of solving the same problem as well. If they are happy with your solution and the interviewer gives a thumbs up, then you will get a offer letter after 3 4 days only. So the application process and everything is pretty standard, but you have to understand that the chances of getting selected in such companies are very low, because there are loads and loads of people who are already applying. And yeah, you have to understand the population ratio of India, the talented individuals versus the openings that these companies post. So don't get too demotivated if you don't get the selection. It's okay, it's part of the process. You learn a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So since you went with the scholarship route, you just had the rounds online, right? With all the DSA and the behavioral round, right? So did you have some sort of
Actually,
Amazon, or was that only at Google?
interviews were actually before disbursing the scholarship. They had a very elaborate process of selecting the scholars.
Okay.
So during the process, we had three interview rounds. Like in the first year, we had three interview rounds.
Mm.
So you have to understand that they have refined 500 scholars very carefully. So they say that they don't need to interview now. They only need to check your technical expertise. And after that, they give a return internship based on your performance in the internship. So they don't have any obligation to have you in the company. If you
Yeah.
work well, you'll get the PPI. If you don't, you won't. So it was pretty standard, and I think it was justified given the rounds I've given in the first year itself. So yeah, in the second year we did not have any interview, only the assessment.
So what about Google? For Google, was it through scholarship, or for Google you must have gone through that entire process, right? So I would want to talk
Yeah.
about the particularly interview process. Like how was your experience on the interview day, and like how did things run?
Yeah, so interview is a big thing. when you're interviewing with Google. It's a 45-minute interview round. For the first 5 minutes, you are given to introduce yourself. You want to know the interviewer, and in those 5 minutes, you are also given your first question. So the interviewing in and coding in Google is very difficult. I'll tell you. What happens is they share a Google Doc, then you have to code over there. That does not have any autocomplete. It does not have any syntax, any boilerplate. So you have to do that. Okay. And at the same time, the interviewer can see what you're writing. So it's a real time update software. So you have to give an optimized solution over there. You have to explain your approach and you have to code it up. Then, after doing this for the first question, you have to do this again for the second question as well. All of this in 45 minutes. So, and there is a very elaborate discussion. It's not like anything is compromised in the discussion part. You have to explain it well about how you weaved the whole approach. So, the two questions can be independent, mutually exclusive, like one from one topic and the other from other topic, or it can be first question's extension as the second question. Like if I have a DP recursion question, the interviewer can extend the same question as well.
Okay.
So this was the first round, and similar was the second round as well. The same process, everything, but the second round has a slightly bit harder questions compared to the first round.
Okay. So you talked about the elaborate discussion. So like, what do they sort of try to test in that discussion? Are they trying to see whether you know the concept, or like what was it? Could you talk a bit about the discussion if you remember? Sort of like what was it?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so whatever you have coded up, you have to explain how the dry run would work. Like you have to explain how the code works so that they know you understand what you have coded. Because there are multiple ways of cheating going on. Even though the camera is on, even though you are not copy
Yeah.
pasting, you can still cheat. There is a slight window that one can use. So they do want to check that. And the second discussion is about time complexity. They are very much obsessed with the time complexity part. They want to understand how to optimize it every time. If it's n square, then how to bring it to a linear time complexity or a logarithmic time complexity. So the discussion is about that. And if your first approach is brute force, then how to optimize it, one can be asked about that as well. Like I was asked for the optimized solution plus optimized time complexity for the first question. For the second one, I was not asked much because the time was less and she was happy with my approach. So that is the discussion about.
Okay. So Shruti has emphasized something, time complexity, and also she has emphasized optimized solution a lot throughout this podcast. So when you are solving questions on lead code, a lot of people just they get the solution, they move on. So is it important to, at the time when you're solving questions on lead code and contest, is it important to look back at the question and sort of check out all the different approaches that are present? Because you're attempting at first, you usually have a brute force approach. Only some people would really be able to, after a lot of practice, be able to directly sort of understand the optimized approach. So did you do that? And yeah, how should folks sort of go about after solving a question? What did you do and what should folks do?
Yeah, so when solving on lead code, my usual approach is, of course, you can go with the like standard brute force approach. If your answer is acceptable, then you have a whole analysis that you get in lead code, like how many people were ahead
Yeah.
of you, the time taken, and everything. You can analyze where your solution stands. If you are in the first four bars, then I think it's all right. It's minimal, but you can check out the other solutions. What are they doing? Which solution had better time complexity compared to yours?
Yeah.
You have to understand how others are working through the solution. You may learn something new through their solution. So it's a good practice to search certain of the solutions. Like there are certain people who are really good on lead code. So
Yeah.
you can check regularly their solutions and how they are navigating. So yeah, keeping a check on other solution is a good way to go.
Yeah, and there are a lot of resources now. Like we have Neat Code, and then you have a lot of people that have
Yeah.
Neat Code is something that I personally followed. Not that the
Mm-hmm.
podcast is sponsored or anything, but there are many other resources where you can understand the different sort of solutions. I wanted to talk about the different domains. Like when you're entering engineering now in computer science, you have n number of domains. There are people that are into AI, there's machine learning, there's DevOps, and there's
Mm-hmm.
many other domains and many other options. And a lot of people, as new folks, they're really confused. And even as someone in the third year or fourth year, a lot of time people are really confused as to what domain should they like dive into? So, what are your thoughts on that? And like you're into AI ML, so like yeah, you could talk a bit about that as well. So, what are your thoughts about selection of a appropriate domain?
Yeah, so you see, when a kid is small, they see a lot of candies and they get a lot of lured in all of those. The problem with engineering students is same. They have AI, ML, they have cyber security, they have AIDS, they have DevOps. So the problem is कि none of the companies are giving specialization roles to freshers.
Yeah,
But freshers don't understand this. You have to understand that the roles given to freshers are software development engineer or a software engineer. There's a reason these roles are designated this name. Under this name, I tell you, in Amazon, I have worked on multiple projects in multiple disciplines, but my role was SD. When I worked on LLM, my role was SD. When I worked with APIs, my role was still SD. So you cannot have a specialization in one subject. You have to cover all of them. You have to first build strong basics and then go up your way. My advice is to nail DSA first, and then if you have interest in some of the domains, of course you can be curious about things. So you can learn about AIML, you can learn about AIDS, but don't just cage yourself up with one of the domains. You have to keep your doors open. If you are doing this, it's only disadvantageous for you. So, yeah, message is loud and clear. Do not cage yourself up. Explore everything, learn about everything, and focus on one. And that is a broader spectrum that gives, which is DSA.
yeah. So it's sort of like for people that watch cricket, that you have to know your straight drive and you have to know your basic shots before you can actually play like Surya Kumar Yadav or someone who's hitting shots in random direction. And people generally forget. They think that his basics aren't good, but in order to play at such a level, your basics have to be really good, and your basics would be development, basic development, and DSA as you mentioned, which is an umbrella activity which is present throughout. So, Shruti, I'd like to jump to a new segment that we have with the podcast. We're inaugurating that, the pulse of the viewers. That is what the segment is. It's basically a rapid fire sort of segment where I'll have some doubt from my viewers, and you can just quickly sum up the doubt. So, I'd want to start off with Ankita Lomte. She had a doubt, and her question was how to approach DSA questions in interviews. You've talked about that a bit, but yeah, I want a quick fire response to that. How to approach DSA questions in interviews.
Yeah, so in interviews, they expect that once they have stated the questions, if you have any questions, you can ask them. You have to firstly thoroughly read it. In interviews, what happens is we miss out on important details because we are under a lot of pressure. So read it thoroughly. Then you are given 4 to 5 minutes. What interviewers do, they leave the questions open ended. They might not give you the edge cases, they might not give you the test cases. So you can, it is your chance to show that you are aware of the question and you are thinking in the right way. So you may pose what questions you have about the problem statement that is given to you. Then after for 4 to 5 minutes, you can just have your pen and paper with you. You can jot down the points that you can think about the problem statement. Let's say when you read the question, you are just blank. You just don't know how to do it. Give yourself a break. Take a long breath. Then wait. Then jot down everything that you understand about the question and forget about the code. Think of it as a mathematical puzzle. Understand that how will your mind, in your mind, if you have this question, how are you going to solve? Not as a code, but as your mind, as a human brain. Once you get that, then tell about all this to your interviewer. Whatever interviewer is doing, they are there to help you. They want you in your company, they are not against you. So most of the times interviewers are very helpful. They give you hints, they understand you, they do understand that you are a fresher, you don't have all the experience. So yeah, this is the whole approach. Think out loud is the most important one. Whatever you are thinking, whatever is going on your mind, you have to share it with the interviewer so they know what are your abilities, how are you approaching the question. So this is how you do it, and once you get a thumbs up on yeah, this solution would work, then you can start to code it up. Then to it is easy road.
Okay. So the second question is from Sahil Adit, and he asks which topics are mostly asked in coding rounds. I don't think you can talk about specific questions, but you can talk about your experience, like what sort of topics or questions frequently appeared in your experience thus far.
Yeah, so over my experience that all the companies I've applied, I've seen that each company gives a hint on what topics we need to study. So for some companies, there are hard topics like DP, recursion, binary trees,
Yeah.
tries is also a topic. Then these are the questions. For some other companies, like if you go for a fintech, they won't ask you to do DP, they won't ask you recursion, but they'll ask you easy questions like arrays, strings, bit manipulation, storage, and all these things. So yeah, it depends highly on the company, but if you asked for a broader way, then my thinking is up to recursion. Like if you go through the roadmap of DSA, up to recursion, your DSA should be strong. DP takes time, that's why I'm not including it in the list. Trees are also easy topics. If you want to cover it, if you give 2 to 3 days and solve as many questions as you can, you will be able to cover trees as well.
Okay. So the third question, Sheetal, is what do they expect in a resume? So I don't want you to go in too much detail, but you can give a broad overview as what they expect.
Yeah, yeah, so basic structure everybody knows. I'll give you the additional pointers. Having good projects is very important on the resume, because it shows that you have done something worthwhile other than your theory colleges that in colleges you have been taught. So projects are a great way to go. And if you want to go through research papers and publish your own research papers or patents, then it shows that you know about certain field very much through research papers. So you can go through that. And if you have internship experiences, that is also helpful. Certifications, awards, these are also important if you have it. So yeah, and my major tip is that add your skills like soft skills, technical skills. That helps the interviewer to understand, the recruiter to understand. Okay, this person is aware of how the market situation works. It is not just about the technological advancement that you have in you, but also the soft skill set that you can possess. Team leadership, team management, teamwork. These things are very important when working in corporate. So yeah, you can include these as well.
Okay, so the last doubt was asked from Manas, and he talks about dev versus DSA. And I think Manas, you can check out the video. We've already uh, talked about DSA versus dev. So Shruti, it was really awesome having you. Doesn't feel like we talked for so long. I don't want to make the podcast too long, given that we live in the Insta reel generation now. I don't know if a lot of people even reach the end of the podcast with the given sort of attention span they have nowadays. So Shruti, it was very good talking to you. And folks, you can connect with Shruti on LinkedIn. She has a great reach on LinkedIn, around 7,000 to 800 followers on LinkedIn itself. She keeps on posting stuff. And you can try to find out more such people like Shruti, who can really give a lot of benefit to the folks that want mentors or someone like that. So Shruti, anything you want to say out to the public? Anything from yeah, I don't know, from your experience, anything else you'd want to just give out a message to everyone watching?
Yeah, to all watching, please don't beat yourself out just because you are in a tier 3 college. You have to give yourself a fair chance before the recruiters can give you an interview call. Apply. Please apply. Even if you fail, try to apply and be ready for the situation where you are given the interview call. Most people are not applying, and market situation is much better. Believe me, you will get the interview if you apply. So go for it and all the best. And if you need ever need any help, you can always ping me on LinkedIn. I'll try my best to help everyone.
And you can also mention your doubts on the comment section. I'll try to reach Shruti if you're not able to find the LinkedIn link, and I'll also attach that. So thank you so much, Shruti, for sparing some time. It was really good talking to you.